happen, but remember, you've got to be funky.
Welcome to this week's episode of Between the Lanes. I'm Tom Lane, and I'm excited to be with you today. We're carrying on a podcast that we actually began. This is part 2 of a podcast with JB Copeland. JB is a friend. He's a contributor to things that we're doing in ELI, but he's someone that we've known for a number of years and greatly appreciate and respect his family. JB, welcome back.
Thank you. I'm excited to be back.
We're glad to have you.
Let's finish this story.
Yeah, we were on a cliffhanger. You and Todd left it right at the edge. So I'm going to take just a step back and ask you a question.
Okay.
When my kids were growing up in their teen years, one of the most common things I said when they were about to go out was, hey, remember, you're either an influence or you're being influenced. You be the influence tonight. Do you think anything that your dad could have said, just because of the environment of performance that you felt, the pressure to perform, would that have come across as more pressure to perform, or would that have helped you? Is there anything that could have been done in that season of life that could have maybe helped steer you away from the path that you ended up on?
You know, I don't completely know. I remember, I remember my dad multiple timeless times pulling me aside and saying, "You can always talk to me." And there's something that we called dead man talks, and he's like, "I'll listen to you, and I won't react." But I never took it seriously. I never felt, even with him saying that, I still didn't feel like that trust was there.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I don't know why. I think it goes back to things that were ingrained in me at a really young age, to no matter what you're saying, it's not ringing true. And so I don't think that there's anything that he could have said.
Yeah. Yep.
Which sounds kind of hopeless, but it really isn't. It just was at that point. I think that my mind had been made up of that this wasn't safe, even though it was. But I believed that this wasn't safe to be honest and be myself.
Yep. Okay, so I want to pick up a couple of things before we pick up the story. So you met Chloe, you got engaged, you got married, all while dealing with this.
Yes.
And you kept her in the dark. I mean, from your perspective, she knew something was not right, but you kept her in the dark. What was going on in that side of things? Were you ever afraid? Was there performance in that as well? Afraid that if she really knew who I was, she wouldn't love me?
Yes. I think it carried over from how I felt about my parents or my coaches. Well, now it's like I have my wife's in my life, and if she knows, so no matter what the relationship really was, unless it was like a close friend or a guy that I did these things with, no one knew who I was, including my wife, because if they knew, what does that mean? Yeah.
So I'm just sure that there are people that are tuning into the podcast, and that's where they are. They feel like I'm in a situation, and if people knew who I really was, that they wouldn't accept me, they wouldn't love me, I'd lose my job, I'd lose my family, or whatever it is. So you left us in this last podcast. You went to a counselor, and the counselor, after a few times, said, "I can't help you, and you need help." So pick it up from there. What happened?
Well, so the counselor said, JB, you need to go to rehab. And so I remember getting on my phone after, and I remember I told Chloe, and maybe this is something I need to do. And I looked up, how long is a rehab stay? And it said 12 days. And I was like, oh, I can do that. 12 days. Like, that's not bad. I can, But what I came to find out that, like, that wasn't true at all. It was actually 90 days.
Oh.
And so once Nancy Houston had told me that, it was another 2 months before I actually went to rehab. And so what had happened, and I actually just found this out, but what had happened was we had gone and stayed over at my parents one night, maybe mid-June of 2022. And I was just I was in a bad place, but, I'm trying to figure it out, and I'm, not really living in reality, living in delusion.
Yeah.
And I remember walking downstairs, and my mom and my wife were talking, and it was like whispers. And I was like, in my head, they weren't talking about me. They were talking about some other drama or something. But I was like, what are y'all talking about? And they just were awkward. And I was like, okay. And I kind of just forgot about it. And, Chloe comes upstairs, an hour later, and I'm like, what were you talking about? And she's like, nothing, don't worry about it. And I was like, okay. Well, a couple of days go by, and we have, it was Father's Day. And it's funny, we joke about this, but we all went to Outback. We never go to Outback. I don't know why we chose Outback, but we went there, and, I was kind of off my rocker, just not in a good place. I didn't look good. And I could tell something was up with my dad. That was one thing about me is I think with the performance in me, I got really good at telling when something was wrong, whether in my mom or my dad. Like, I always knew. They didn't have to say anything. It could be a look. It could be, my mom does something where she breathes like, that is in me to where I know that something's wrong. So, like, I could tell by my dad's face that something was up.
Okay, now, at this point, are you smoking weed every day?
No. So this is what happened with that. When I got engaged to Chloe, I said, I'm done with all these hard drugs. I need something that, is natural, whatever. And so there's a drug. Well, really, it's a plant out of Southeast Asia called kratom. And kratom is pretty much, it's from the coffee family. It doesn't sound bad, but it's terrible. And really what it is like, it's a synthetic opioid. Wow. And you drink it, it's, a powder, and you drink it, and it creates the same effect of like if you were to take a painkiller. And so that was my drug of choice for like 3 years. And you can, it's not illegal. You can go get it from the gas station if you wanted to, which is crazy.
Yeah.
But at the same time, earlier that year, I'd also started taking Adderall, and I would take a weed gummy to go to sleep. It was like I had this mixture of what is going to make me work today. Like, how am I going to survive today? And so it was this mixture of stuff. And so they kind of all knew what it was at that point. I'd been honest with, my mom and my dad, and Chloe knew way more. But, and so I go home that night, and yes, it's every day, and it's a lot of it. And it's, I'm living day to day on substance.
Yeah.
Like, how am I going to operate?
Yeah.
And that really was what it was. It's like I'm waking up and I'm in a frenzy. Like, everything feels off. I feel like, my nervous system is crazy. I don't really know what was going on. So the next morning we have at the Dallas campus, every Monday morning, we had a 9 a.m. Zoom meeting, and it was a prayer meeting. And I'm going to log in to the prayer meeting, and I get a phone call from my dad. And I text him, I'm like, hey, I'm on a meeting. And he goes, I don't care. Call me back. And so I turned my camera on, and I'm like, hey, guys, I got to take a call real quick. I'll be right back. And so I text my campus pastor. I'm like, hey, my dad wants to talk to me. And so he's like, okay, don't worry about it. And so I call my dad back, and he goes, JB, you're going to rehab. And I was like, what?
Wow. Yeah.
You sure? I don't know if I really want to do that. And at that time, I'm still like 12 days. It's 12 days. I can go for 12 days. And I was like, okay, you know, I feel like, you know, I had made some excuse, and he was like, go ask Chloe what she thinks. And so I hung up the phone, and Chloe was still asleep, and I went and, you know, shook her, and I was like, hey, my dad thinks I should go to rehab. What do you think? And she was just like, yes, like in her sleep. And I was like, okay. Like, you know, I'm still trying to stay optimistic at this point. Like, I'm living in delusion world. And so I called my dad back, and I was like, okay, like in you know, I don't know what to feel. And he says, okay, come up to Central. We're going to talk to HR.
Yep. To the offices there.
Yeah. And, you know, let's figure out FMLA, and, you know, you need to go be honest with your campus pastor, blah, blah, blah. Like, we need to have conversations. And I'm like, okay. So that was a pretty grueling day, because, you know, it's embarrassing, you know? So I go up there and I have conversations. I get put on FMLA, and, you know, I'm going to rehab. Now, the thing is I didn't know where I was going to go. You know, there's thousands of rehabs. So I get home, and I don't know if y'all know Pastor Lamar Slay.
Yes.
So he was my oversight at Dallas for a long time.
Yeah.
And I gave him a call because his son was a drug addict. Yeah. And I knew that his son owned a rehab down somewhere near San Antonio, and maybe they had a connection. Because we were looking up online, and I was like, I don't know where to go. I've never even thought about rehab, nor have I thought about any of that kind of stuff. I've only thought about church camp. Like, let's go to maybe church camp can help me. So Lamar's son calls me, and they get me connected with this place called Casa Colina, and it's in the middle of nowhere in Waxahachie, Texas. And so I'm thinking, okay, I got maybe 4 or 5 days to hang out, and, you know, let's take our time here. Like, I'm not really trying to go tomorrow. And the guy was like, okay, we'll see you tomorrow at 11. And I was like, oh. So at that point, like, it got real, really real. And I remember that night, me and my wife went to go we love drinking boba teas. I don't know if you've heard of a boba tea. It's like this Asian thing, and all the young kids do it, I guess. But it's like this, it's a fun drink that is fruity. And we were sitting outside, and Chloe ran inside to get it, and my mom called me, and I remember telling my mom, these people can't help me. Like, do you realize that I've tried my whole life to make this go away? Like, these people can't help me. Like, what makes you think me going to a rehab is going to do anything? And I remember her saying, you sound hopeless. And I was like, yeah, I am. And I'm going to get back to that. But the next day, my mom and my dad and my wife put me in the car. I pack a bag, and they drive me to Waxahachie, Texas. I'm crying. My mom's crying. Chloe's crying. I'm like, I'm not going. Like, I'm trying to figure out an escape method, because that's what I always did, was escape, numb. And I get there. I hug them goodbye, and they walk me straight in. It's this big house in the country. There's horses. There's a workout barn dominium. There's, land. It's the middle of summer. It hadn't rained at all in that summer. So like the lake was dried up. And so I was just kind of trying to paint the picture for you, but it was a hot day, and they walked me right inside to like the nurse's office. And the nurse was like, "Are you high right now?" And I was like, well, "Yeah, I am." What do you expect? Like, I'm not going to come here my first day and, not take something. And so, they were laughing, but I remember they came in, and the owner came in, and he said, "Are you hopeless?" And I said, "Yeah." And he goes, "Good." He's like, that's the best place to be. Mm. And I was like, "What are you talking about?" But what I realize is in our hopeless moments, that is the moment where God can finally come in and show us his hope, because our controls run out. Yeah. There's nothing, so there's nothing else I can do. I've been trying for 10 years on my own, asking God for help and trying to, but never really accepting it. Mm. And so that's what started a brutal 2 or 3 weeks
So was there a withdrawal? Or
There really wasn't. No. I thought there would be, but they did put me in detox for a week. And they had me on this stuff called Suboxone, which is a medicine you take to get off of. A lot of these guys in there were on like fentanyl and all this kind of stuff. And luckily that was not what I was taking. The only withdrawal truly was the emotional. Yeah. It wasn't physical.
Which is every bit as, maybe even more addictive than the drug itself.
Yeah, it was just this emotion. Really, it was, there's this pain, so much pain that I've been numbing, and now it's all coming to the top, and I don't know how to deal with it. So the first week was not bad because I was in detox, and you didn't really have to get on schedule. You could lay down, but after day 5, they moved me into the house with all the guys. I was in a room with, 4 or 5 other guys. There were 20 of us in there. And I mean, it was terrible. It was terrible, snoring at night. And it's crazy because, when you think of rehab, you don't really know what you're going to get with the people there. But I mean, from millionaires to 17-year-old to a 45-year-old, like the whole spectrum was there. It was like, like every single person that I had experienced, like there was some type of that person there. It was like all of us were different. And so that's what really started that stay, and that stay is what changed my life. And so
when did it dawn on you that it was going to be more than 12 days?
Right when I got there. It was a fight for about a week. Wow. They were like, "You're going to be here for 90 days," and I was like, "No." Like I'm not. Like 90 days was not comprehensible. Yeah. Like there was no end in sight. So it was like torture because I couldn't comprehend being there for 90 days. And so it just felt extremely hopeless because 90 days isn't that long, but when you're stuck and they take your phone, all you can do is read. You're in group therapy all day. You're stuck in a house with 20 different guys. They won't let you leave. I'm like, I'm in prison. But it actually was way better than that. But, in your head, you're freaking out.
So if you were describing the emotion and feelings of it, would it be on a bell curve? Or like there's a point at which the height of everything that you hated about it and the started to wane away, and slowly you got into a comfort zone and began to feel a healing take place? What was that like?
Yeah, so there were markers. Wow. So maybe the 7th night there, they had already moved me into a room with those other 5 guys, and I was off detox medicine, and it was just me, myself, and I call it me, myself, and the devil and God. And it was just this internal, this heated battle. And it was extremely painful because I remember being in bed. It was 3 a.m. And I didn't really, everything in me was trying to escape, but there was nowhere to escape to. There was nothing to take. There was nowhere to run. All of this was internal. And all options had been taken from me. There was nothing I could do but sit in it. And I just remember wanting to crawl out of my skin, and however I can stop this pain, and I didn't even know what the pain was. It was just like everything. If you just threw everything that I'd gone through and put it in a blender, that was it. It was everything. Yeah. And I hadn't felt in so long. And so the first thing I felt was just extreme fear, anxiety, sadness, worry, on so many different angles. And so it was probably 3 a.m. and I was like, God, like, this is terrible. I don't know what to do. And I remember him saying to me, he said, let your pride and ego die. Like, let it die right now. And I was like, okay, how? And he was like, starve it. You can't feed it. And so what that meant was I got to just let it scream. And so I ended up going to bed that night. And I would say, you know, it was a 3-week process of feeling extreme pain daily. There was no like, let's take the edge off. It was just like, I had to sit in it. I had to feel it. On July 4th, you know, I was really sad I wasn't with my wife, and they let us, you know, grill hot dogs, and I didn't want anything to do with it. And I went and I locked myself in the media room, and they let us have TV on the weekend. And a new show had come out with Chris Pratt, and it was called, what was it called? It was a Navy SEAL show. It's on Amazon Prime, The Terminal List. And I sat there and watched all 10 episodes that day. And during the middle of it, I saw these men. Number one, like, these men would go away for 6 months at a time, and they would fight the enemy, and they were training, and, you know, and I was like, that's a sacrifice. And, you know, poor me. Like, you know, I started getting, like, trying, like, this warrior in me started to come out, and a new voice. I was really quiet. But after that, I walked out of the room that night, and the spiritual director was there. He's over spirituality there. And he sits me down and he goes, hey, I feel like God told me that you're in Navy SEAL training for him. And
wow.
that moment, he didn't know I was watching that.
Yeah.
And that moment was really big for me. It didn't take away the pain, but it gave me this will, this purpose to. And so at that point, I decided, okay, I might feel like this, but every single day, I'm going to be on time for groups. I'm going to go first, not to perform, but to give the effort that I know I need to give. I can't earn this, but I can give effort.
Yeah.
I'm going to work out every day. I'm going to lead these guys if they want me to be their leader. I'm going to eat right. I'm going to be on time for 7 a.m., you know, prayer and meditation. But at the same time, as this is going on, there was a shift happening in me. And I talked about there was this foundation of fear. Well, what I realized is for this to change, my foundation had to crack. And the only way it could crack is if I just would let go and let God take care of some things. And so there were 2 things that were torturing me, these mental thoughts. The first one was finances. And I don't know why, but this thought would not leave me alone. It was torturing me. It was $60,000 to be there. I'm like, how am I going to pay for this? I'm going to put me and my wife in debt. Or is my dad going to have to? And it was torturing me. Just the fear of this, there's going to be no provision. And I felt like God said, every time you think it, I want you to tell me to take it. And thousands of times over a week, I would go on walks, and I'd just be tortured, and I'd just have this fear, and I'd say, God, take it, over and like out loud, take it. And I would say take it sometimes, and this peace would come over me for 30 seconds, and it was like I would keep on saying it, just take it. And about a week and a half go by, and they call me in and they say, hey, we want to put you on scholarship. We're going to pay for your whole stay here. And that was another marker.
Oh, boy, I guess.
And I felt like at that moment, the foundation of fear just cracked. And this new seed of faith was planted in me to where it was like, whoa. Like I didn't know this was you, God. I didn't know you like this. Not only that, but you're answering these prayers while I'm in rehab for drugs, and I'm a youth pastor that's screwed up and has left these kids all summer by themselves with our coordinator that's trying to figure it out by himself, and I've lied to my parents, my wife, but you're still going to answer me like this? Oh, you love me like that. And so that moment wasn't, like I said, another marker that really began to change me. the next thought that was torturing me was reconciliation with my family. Like I cared more about me and my wife being happy and me and my dad being on good terms. And so,
was there that inner voice then that said, that's not going to happen, they're never going to accept you back? Or what was the torture part of that?
well, after God answered that first prayer, my inner voice changed. And it was way easier to surrender it. And I didn't have to surrender it as much. It was like it became ingrained in me that I knew he would.
Yeah.
You know, I think the torture part that came with it was, I think most of it was, are me and my wife going to be able to like have a healthy relationship? And like, is she going to forgive me? And is my dad going to accept me for who I actually am? Because I'm finally getting to know me, and I don't know if he'll like that. Like, you know, I'm not the same as him. And so, the very last week of rehab, it was family week, which means your family comes out and it's 3 days intensive therapy. And so I had a belief in me, and I said, listen, like, God, I'm going to go first in everything that we do. Like, I'm going to be honest. I'm going to give effort. I'm going to say sorry. You know, I'm going to be humble. And I have a vision of what it would look like to bring reconciliation to our family. Like, you know, I have a vision of what I'd like that to look like.
Yeah.
And so, but I said, I'm going to let you handle this. I'm not going to manipulate the situation. I'm just going to be honest. I'm going to, like, there's no performance anymore. Like, they got to know where I'm at. And so they came in, and it was 3 days. And, you know, one of the craziest moments was, you know, I had to sit face to face with my dad, and I had to tell him who I was. And I had to tell him that I wanted him to know me, and I wanted him to accept me for who I was. And, you know, maybe that came with some rough edges, and maybe that came with, you know, maybe me not doing things exactly like him. And I had to get honest with him. And that's why I was saying, when you asked me if it could have something he could have said differently back then, I don't know, but his heart posture then was, I just want my son to know I love him. And the pain that he'd been through with me, and the reflection that he'd had to go through while I'm gone. Yeah. And, you know, he's probably asking himself, what did I do wrong? Or, you know, whatever those internal thoughts are, that at the end of the day, it had nothing to do with him and everything to do with me. And I just wanted to, all I cared about was making sure he knew who I was. And for him to accept me, I think that changed everything. And then for my wife to, you know, forgive me, and for me to be able to, you know, be real with her and honest with her, and for us to begin a new journey of trust. But the reconciliation and the restoration that came from it was not anything that I thought. It was interwoven way deeper and way more than I could have ever asked for or manipulated in my own way. It wasn't just reconciliation with me and them. It was reconciliation with all of us intertwined, like from my wife to my mom. And from that point on, they've become best friends before they weren't. Yeah. Because of all of the lies. You know, my wife and my dad, my wife and my brothers, me and my mom, my dad and my mom. It was like this. And I knew at that point, when I saw that, and I knew myself from the pain that I'd walked through and the work that I'd done, I knew at that point that God's in control. And there's nothing to fear. And through those days there, he turned my fear into faith. And it's been like that ever since. And obviously I'm always growing and always, but there's nothing to fear. Like, he's going to take care of, I don't have to be tortured because I know what he did. Like, I know what he did. And I didn't have that moment before of what he did in my life.
That's awesome. Yeah. Yeah. So, the fact that there was a turnaround, that was a turnaround moment, wasn't it?
Yep.
Where you knew God is real and God is at work in me, not because of anything I've done, but because he loves me.
Yes.
That's powerful.
Yes. And because I can finally be honest with him.
Yeah.
Because not only have I not been honest with me and others, but I haven't been honest with him.
Yeah.
And he's going to accept my honesty. And he's going to, I was at such a broken place that there was no other option but to be honest with him.
Yeah. So how long ago was that you went through the rehab?
16 months.
16 months. So one of the, for somebody watching today, one of the things I want you to be able to be honest with this answer, because I think sometimes we portray. So you went through rehab, it all turned around, your family's all good, and there's never been another struggle day since. Has there been struggle days since? And not that you've relapsed, but where's the battle now for you?
The battle now, I think it has a lot to do with my family. I think that we went through the uprooting that we went through because of the year that was to come after that. Nothing is shiny, nothing is perfect on the outside like it used to look. It was we're this and this, and this is how we act, and this. It's actually the exact opposite. And there's a lot of pain that's risen up in my mom and in my dad and in my brothers. And I believe that rehab and those counseling sessions actually brought us to a place to where we could actually accept some transformation from what God was doing. And transformation doesn't come without pain, I don't think.
Yeah.
And so it's been a year of a lot of ups and downs in my family. I think the biggest struggle for me right now is, like, God, are you going to answer, and are you going to do what I feel like you said you're going to do, like in my life? But I know he will. I know he will. And the other thing is, God, are you going to restore my family to a place that I know that you promised that you would? Not that he hasn't already, but there's some things relationally wise, in certain family members that, I'm hoping God brings truth to them.
Yeah.
Even being the older brother, and, for me, my two little brothers, I love them, but they followed after my footsteps. And there was probably a lot of trust broken between me and them. And they're probably wondering, is this dude real? Like, is he real?
Yeah.
Because they have the same struggles.
Sure.
They played football too. We were raised in the same environment. And I think my biggest prayer is, I can reach all these people and with videos, but if my family's not solid, then what does all that matter?
Yeah.
And so I just hope that I know that God will answer when it's time.
Yeah. JB, I think one of the things that your story sort of screams out to me is change begins with one. You think about the impact that this had on your dad, on your mom, it's having on your brothers, on your marriage. You're the linchpin,
right,
in this. That your response to God is influencing a major change in your family. And it's the reality of the promise that you're saying, well, I think God's promised me that there's more healing to come. There will be more healing to come. And part of that is because you're leading the way. You're living true to what God has said, and it's impacting your family. And I want to say, if you're watching today and you're at a place where JB was, without hope, with all kinds of internal struggles and fear, you can do it. You can change. Rehab or counseling is our friend. You can be honest today and experience the kind of freedom that you've heard JB talk about in these last 2 episodes, podcasts. I'd like to ask you a favor, JB. Would you look into the camera and from your perspective, would you talk to somebody maybe like you would have liked to have been talked to?
Yeah.
And then end this episode with a prayer for those that are watching.
I'd love to. If you're watching this right now and you know that there's deeper things that you need to face, there's a quote that I love, and it's, "The fears that we don't face become the limits that we call fate." And I want you to know that there's unlimited things that you can do, but until you turn around and you face the fire, those limits are gonna rule your life. The trauma is gonna be the wind in your sails, and it's gonna be leading you, and you won't know it's leading you. The one thing that I think I needed more than anything was reassurance, and someone that's walking in trying to find healing. Sometimes that comes with negativity. Sometimes that comes with people being mad at you. People don't know how to handle you. You know, I went through that. I felt a lot of guilt and shame during my walk through healing. But I want to tell you this, is that I'm here to tell you that you can be reassured that life's going to be good. There's hope for you. People are proud of you. I'm proud of you. God loves you. We love you. There's people that love you. And for you to take the courageous step to heal should be something that's celebrated. Yeah. And if you feel guilt for taking that step, or you feel like you're being berated with anger, or people, whatever it might look like, the thing that you need right now is reassurance. And I want you to know that you're on the right path. And if you'll just ask God for help, and you'll be aware to the doors that he's opening, and you'll walk through those doors honestly, you will heal. Give effort. Don't earn it. Be honest with yourself. And God's going to come through in a way that you can't understand. So I'm going to pray for you real quick. So Father, right now, I just ask that the person watching that's dealing with deeper things that they might not be able to put a name to, whether it be anxiety, fear, depression, anger, pride, resentment. God, I ask right now that you would open a door for them to walk through. A lot of times, God, we don't know where to go. We don't know how to handle it. So God, they're asking for help right now, and I'm asking help on their behalf, that Lord, you would open a door in their life, and they would be aware of it so they can walk through and find the healing that they need. God, I ask that you would lead them in every step, you would light up their path, and that they would be able to walk and find healing because you led the way. So I pray that over each person right now, that Lord, whatever their full purpose is in this life, that they would reach it, and that they would say, no more to this fear that is controlling me, and that I know that this does not have to be my reality. So God, right now we ask that in your mighty name.
Yes. In
Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. JB, thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you for the time. Thank you for sharing your story and for being a leader in your generation. It means so much.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for joining us on Between the Lanes. We'll see you on next week's podcast.
Got to be cool, fool. You can make it happen, Captain, but remember, you got to be funky.